Mieli žiūrovai, sveiki sugrįžę į Martyno Mažvydo biblioteką čia Vilniuje, kur tęsime mūsų konferenciją NordEd.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're back at the conference NordEd 2021. You have already listened to a number of very interesting presentations from Norway, Sweden and Denmark, and we have heard about long life learning. We even heard about quality compass. And now we have distinguished guests and we're going to address these issues. I would say that most probably a more general view of lifelong learning. We have Eglė Radišauskienė, who is head of the Lithuanian Business Confederation. I think that she has been in senior positions in Social Security and Labor Ministry. She's very active and she has contributed to developments in the employment sector. And now she is head of the Business Confederation of Lithuania. Now we have Mindaugas Lingė, who is a professional, I would like to say, because he used to work in two teams, and that is two presidential teams for President Adamkus and President Grybauskaitė. And he was focusing on lifelong learning and, in general, social issues. Now he is member of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, chairman of the Social Affairs and Labor Committee. And last but not least, we have Marius Jovaiša, who has many hats. He's an author, businessman, publisher, and educator. Most probably he is famous, and no, not only in Lithuania, but worldwide, for his album of photos. And these were snapshots of Lithuania. Let me start from the Lithuanian Business Confederation, because they are an important part of lifelong learning. We know that the very concept of employment changes with the change in digitalization, globalization, etc. So we have changes, and people feel that they are underskilled for certain jobs, and employers note that they need skills, they need people to fill jobs, and they get underskilled people, and then they have to train them on the working level. So what is it? Is it reskilling? Is it upskilling? What do employers need to do? And how do you see employers in their overarching system of lifelong learning? And I think, what is employers' role in the education system? Let me start by saying that an individual is a key figure here, because an individual should be prepared not for unemployment or a job, but for life. And this means to say that a person comes into a labor market not ready to work, even though they have skills and they have competences. So we need people who are motivated to continue learning on the job. And we know that the pandemic period showed that people need certain competencies when they get a job. So sometimes people as if close themselves within certain competencies and they don't want to continue learning. So then nothing can happen and they cannot be helped. And I think that lifelong learning is particularly important because now with automation, digitalization, we are in a risky situation. OECD data shows that we are not very advanced. We see that people are not ready to engage in lifelong learning. Some statistical data that I saw from about 2 years ago show that people who are on the list of employment exchange, as we call it. So when they were approached with a proposal to go and learn, they say no, they don't want to. So I come back to an individual who should be willing to continue learning. Well, competencies are acquired, basic competencies are acquired in the kindergarten. And of course, families, and then we go on from kindergartens and family, we get to school, and then we continue upward. And as you asked me about employers associations, employers' position, so I think that, yes, employers are actively engaged in lifelong learning. And this is true about a number of foreign countries. We still need this prioritized. So we should focus on suggesting people lifelong learning, particularly if people are underskilled or they're not adequately skilled. So we have a very clear disbalance between the competencies available in the market and the needs of the labor market. So there are efforts, I know, but it is a very long process. We should continue with the process. I'm not even speaking about general things. I'm speaking about simplistic things, skills. So skills are acquired not only with knowledge, skills are related to experience. People must be open, must be able to respond quickly, and they should be flexible. Thank you. Thank you, Eglė. You mentioned trade unions, employers, too, and our colleague from Denmark mentioned this too, because she said that there was an agreement signed and trade unions are engaged in shaping the content of programs and courses. So employers and trade unions should contribute to shaping the programs as well. In Lithuania, we think this is an important aspect. We know that our Nordic partners focus on partnership. So partnership covers employers, covers public sector, and our lifelong learning. So who should be a leader in the whole process? You see the situation, you state of affairs. So who is the leader? Taking everything into account, I say the government should have the leadership. If the government prioritizes things, and by the way, we are very happy to have a national agreement between parties, so education already means a priority. So now we must make sure that people should be ready to be flexible, to learn. And then I think that every individual, each and every one, should be interested in learning, and of course trade unions and employers should contribute. Thank you. Before the pandemic period, the European Parliament made public the study where it was very clearly identified that digitalization as well as global changes, green economy and demographic change is important. So this translates into changes in the lifelong learning. So some say that digitalization will kill a number of jobs. Others say that, on the other hand, now employment will be easy for people who have necessary skills. So now, Mindaugas, I have a question to you. There are, of course, problems and challenges identified by Lithuania as well as other countries. But we see that there is more and more demand for highly skillified workers, and I think that this is going to change within a decade. Of course, there will always be a interface between a machine and a human being. Now, you have to encourage decision-making. So what should be done in order to prepare the whole system for the future? I don't mean retrospective, I mean active, proactive, looking at the future. So what are the tracks that we should put our train on to get to the wanted point? Well, thank you for a possibility. Fragmented decisions are there. So, in every government, in every parliament committee, you get a fraction of it. So what we need to do now is take those pieces of a puzzle and make the whole picture. So I don't know if there will be fewer jobs. I'm not certain. I think that countries that are much more advanced than Lithuania, for example, Singapore, New Zealand, Japan, we know that unemployment is not an issue there. I think in 2018, the World Economic Forum produced shocking numbers. The forecast was that 37 million jobs will disappear, but 100 and something million new jobs will appear, and those jobs will require higher qualifications, new competencies. Of course, this means that we must continue doing things. We must never stop. Well, again, this means that about half of the professions that we have now, specialities that we have now, will change change. And this, of course, means that we will have to train people, to retrain them. But when we have a situation in the labor market with a huge gap between the needs and the supply, then, of course, we understand that that's already retroactive. It's a bad situation. Our industry says that about 85 industrial enterprises relies on low-skilled labor. So that's a very bad indicator. So this means that digitalization, robotization is still a long way ahead of us. We want to see our country as an advanced country. We don't want to be a failing country. We don't want to be in the red in statistical data. So OECD statistical data is very indicative. We know very well where we stand, and we want to be in a better position. So I think that we have the only way to create higher added value. Unfortunately, now we seem to be in a sad situation, but there are positive things too. Governments pay more and more attention, and this government in particular not only speak, but they take steps to have more systemic things in the whole sector. Our committee, which is the Social Security and Labor Committee, wants to change the role of the Employment Service, which used to be the Unemployment Exchange. We changed the name to reflect the nowadays reality. So now, if there are 6,000 unemployed per one staff member of the Employment Service, we understand that we have a problem. So about 20% of employers use the services of the Employment Service. So, we have a lot of the unemployed, and the Employment Service records show very high numbers, but they are not needed in the labor market, and they don't want to continue learning, to improve their skills. If we invest into vocational training of a person who is not himself interested in the process, so it's a failure, it's a waste. And I think we should see labor market needs and demands as a guidance for us in that. Look, I have these Lego pieces, and our system is comprised of a number of various different pieces. We have secondary education, we have higher education, we have that. But there are very many people in our system that have different competencies and skills, but they do not become part and parcel of the system. You see, they have competencies, they have skills, but they don't match here. So their qualifications are not needed by the labor market. So let's say they were retrained. So what? Okay, you can even glue them up there, but you can fix them in there, but they won't give any benefit to the whole system. So the Finnish lady that spoke, you remember she spoke about the whole system that is working very well. There is a chain of things, there are pipes, and there is movement in every pipe. So politicians now must think about how separate pieces of the chain get together and the whole system starts running. The whole system lacks motivation now. And you know, if there is very little motivation and you're not so certain what to do, there is a lot of information, but let's say portals are not very easy to understand. The legislation, of course, is very complicated for comprehending. So you don't know the steps that you need to take, and then you fail. You simply feel that you don't want to do anything, so your motivation is killed. So there are chaotic things, yes. There are interesting initiatives, yes. There are separate elements, yes. But those pieces do not fit together. And I think that if we are able to put those separate pieces together, then hopefully we can make it function. Most probably the situation is not very painful. On the other hand, it is painful because the 200,000, this is the total number of the unemployed recorded in Lithuania. So we pay money to them because they had unemployment benefits, and they don't give any benefit to society. Maybe their retraining is not up to their interest. Or maybe we should think about what we can do in 2 decades' time. Thank you, Mindaugas. You mentioned a very interesting thing, motivation. Marius, you are an example of motivation, and studies of lifelong learning show that the most important thing is motivation. Nordic countries have very high numbers in lifelong learning. In Lithuania, we have only 3%, and people over 65 show only 1% of engaging in lifelong learning. So, okay, Lego pieces, and you and your motivation, what was your motivation to start retraining? I know that you did it on your own, then you get public funding, so it was a mix of things, and you still seem to be very motivated. You have never stopped. Your first projects were interesting, then they gave an impulse for you to continue. You seem to be a good example. Oh, thank you. That's a very nice introduction. I'm afraid that I'm those 6%, most probably, of people in our society that have an impulse. I think that learning is fun. To me, definitely. And if you feel that you can do more or better today than you could do a week or a month ago. You are happy. I am the type of person who is very satisfied with my advancement. Of course, it depends on a family. I come from a family of a father who had and continues to have aspirations to learn. We go to a forest, and I know that my father is an archaeologist, a researcher, a scientist, a professor. So then, I remember when I used to be young, we used to go to a forest, and every small piece in the forest, every tree, every grass was of interest to him, and I was motivated to learn more about it. And I think that this approach in life is very important. It's my mantra. Health is the most important thing. Well, yes, I think that everybody understands that health is very important, but I think that the most important investment is investment into ourselves. And I think that if we want to have a real asset lifelong, it is an asset that you can accumulate by learning. There are new professions, for example, environmentalists. I know that there are new branches that seem to be, not very popular now, but very soon such specialities will be of extreme importance. Maybe somebody will find a way to save the Maldives from sinking. It is not true that only finishing school, then graduating from the university and getting to a job is all that you want in a family. No, and I think it depends on a family a lot, but schools are a very important element in one's advancement. If schools have the system that motivates people, that encourages people to continue learning and have huge aspirations, for example, while at school, you already think about a PhD, so you will be very motivated. So in my opinion, if it were for me, I would hold a lot of competitions and possibilities. Sports activities are very popular. For example, in Lithuania, basketball is number one. I want young ladies, girls, to wish to marry not a basketball player, but a teacher. And, unfortunately, this is not the case, but the prestige of our teachers is a very, very urgent thing. We must focus on it. So you yourself and your teachers will help you in your way. That reminds me as a Finnish example. You remember when he spoke about competitions where young people meet and their skills compete. It is not competition based on chemistry knowledge. It is skills competition, and vocational schools as well as employers are very happy to see those competitions. So maybe at some point Lithuania will also hold such a competition. Our Finnish colleague said that was an instrument motivating a lot. People feel very well there, and it's fun to participate. Now that I listen to Marius, now that I listen to you all, and when I think of what has been told from the Nordic countries today, I know that trade unions, governments, and employers, all three elements are very important for having a favorable situation in our labor market. And we know that there are seasonal jobs, and we know that there are more sole proprietorship. We know that people tend to work just those very small jobs, not getting a permanent job, like being freelance. Being freelancers now is very popular. Well, the education sector offers possibility for teachers to have permanent jobs. So, of course, there are lots of jobs, permanent jobs, that employers want to fill. Let's come to Lithuania. What we see in Lithuania is a little bit different. The Nordic model is engaging employers, trade unions, the public sector, and of course, vet schools. And now I think about the future. I think that investment should be coordinated. I'm not now referring to how big the funding is, but I know that there are limits to funding. But maybe social partners can help. Is there any way, you say, an ideal funding pattern? And do you think we can deal with the challenges? If yes, how? I say Eglė is ready.
Makes me very happy to see such accomplishments in the Nordic countries. But they have long-lasting traditions of social dialogue, and respect for social partners is beyond words. They not only respect each other, but they respect government members as well, something that we find amiss here, and we don't behave like that. Of course, this is our problem. I think that we should strive to understand now who is the strongest and who has the strongest powers in Lithuania, so that we can delegate coordination. And I'm not sure. When we talk about social partners, not sure. If you look at the trade unions, yes, of course, we have membership of 7%, and only 17% of companies, I think, have joined employees' organizations. So if we make them stronger, these organizations, of course, they could become the driving force. However, we have low sort of preparedness to join any professional organizations or trade unions. And I think because of that, the role of the government is of utmost importance. So if the government decides to undertake that role, we could move forward. We cannot aspire to use this same model as they have in the Nordic countries. This can be one size for all. Of course, we have to look at our specificities in Lithuania. But what surprises, at least me, in this situation, I think it's both employers' organizations and trade unions could contribute more effectively in order to change something. You were talking about short-term contracts, employment contracts. I remember before we approved the new amendments to the labor code, we discussed that issue, whether, I remember before that, about the major part of the labor employment contracts were not short-term, not fixed. Now we have more termed or short-term contracts. And if we look at this Sodra, statistics of Sodra, we see that there's mobility of employees. They keep working about 3 years, and they are quite flexible, at least more flexible than they used to be. Why? I think just because they are on the learning pathway. As Marius said, then you can adapt to the changing environment, changing needs of the labor market, and that increases your mobility. So we cooperate with the Ministry of Education, Science and Sports, and I think their role is also very important. And we need some response. Look at the number of the unemployed. I don't think separate, just measures for the unemployed. That's not enough. We have to talk about the package, meaning there should be, now, if you are given subsidy, let's say, you are sort of forced to learn and to acquire new competencies. But it should be the entire package, because according to statistics of the Eurofund, those countries which invest in a comprehensive manner will achieve better results, meaning the former unemployed are more prepared to integrate into the labor market, given all the initiatives and all the subsidies. As Mr. Lingė said. Thank you, Mario. Before we talk to Mindaugas, what do you think? How about systemic coordination in lifelong learning? What could this ideal model be applied in Lithuania? Who could be the agents or the of all the stakeholders? How can we find the balance? I agree with what was said, because we are talking about leveraging, meaning the coordinating function should be assumed by, let's say, the agent which has the funding. And I was thinking before the discussion, maybe we could have the system in Lithuania where people could actually accumulate certain scores of showing their accomplishments. I'm talking both about formal and non-formal education. I know physicians, doctors, medical doctors, they have to gather some credits every 2 years in order to renew the license, read presentations, etc. So I think it could be applied to lifelong learning, meaning some incentives, maybe some monetary incentives. Why not? Let's say given to a person who actively participates in some activities, in some clubs, or is willing to enhance, to improve the competencies and skills. And I'm talking about the points of certification, maybe, accreditation. And as far as I know, there are such attempts in the general education sector, meaning even in the diploma, it could be sort of, the remark could be inserted that the person, the diploma holder, has been a volunteer or has been a champion in some sports, and this motivates. And I also think we should think not only mental sort of self-improvement, but also physical skills. We used to have in the old times certain norms, meaning certain norms showing how many sit-ups or push-ups we're able to perform. But it's an incentive, I think, because, yes, if a person is keen on being involved in sports, his well-being and his general health will improve. So we should actually motivate people. I am not a politician, so it's just imagination. I let my imagination run wild, and this is to the benefit of our population. Yes, but I think in most countries, individuals are involved even into political decision-making, and so they become active members of civil societies. And of course, this involvement is very important. Mindaugas, you are closest probably to those institutions which could assume the coordination role. What's your understanding of the ideal lifelong learning coordination model? Something in between two sectors, employment and education. I can only repeat for the third time that the government should be the place where both the opportunities and potential are concentrated, and I wish the government were freed from extinguishing various fires, something we see almost on a daily basis. And I think lifelong learning is just waiting in line to be tackled as a priority. Yes, we could talk about various vouchers, various, let's say, learners' baskets, etc. And in this term of office, our government, well, let's look at a wider perspective. This, I would like to see more consensus between the employers and the other social partners, government and the employees. Could be this tripartite agreement. Like, yes, right, we have disagreements and difference of opinions regarding certain amendments to the labor code, but let's look, let's take a broader picture, meaning we understand that a person leaving that institution has to have certain skills and competencies, and in such a way that this is written in this tripartite agreement, and this is a consensus reached between social partners. So I think this is a result, the outcome of discussions, and there is no way we can go backwards. And I think something that's still missing is we somehow forget to assess the effectiveness of the measures that have been introduced. Right, okay, 16,000 allocated for some measure, yes, for a subsidy, for apprenticeship award, but it's okay, and we no longer, there is no follow-up activity, there is no sort of, and as Finn said, the funding for, let's say, vet institution depends on the performance of its graduates, on the employability of its graduates. So then I think it's real competitions, and in such a way, this gap between the labor market and the skills that we train is bridged. So it's of course related to financial allocations, and but there should be some uniform system, uniform mechanism. I see the priorities like this. With regard to the financial indicator, let's say within the education sphere, if we compare the average in Lithuania and Europe, there are similarities, and since I'm related to the social sphere, I think we still have in the social sphere we still have great discrepancies from 12% to 18%. Yeah, but let's say the allocation of €1 into the education system, I think in the long term would require less investment into the social sphere. Let's say in early education or in primary school, all of a sudden a child loses motivation, and nobody seems to notice that. And that's it. That's the child, meaning if there is no motivation, so he's or she's pre-programmed for becoming a dropout, for not developing any skills, then probably some harmful or delinquent even behavior, etc. So the whole chain starts, and then huge investment will be needed, benefits, etc. Or maybe, well, if we talk about some obsession with substances or what, then treatment, etc. So let's understand the weight of investment, and the earlier investments are made into education, the better the outcomes might be. And eventually things will be cheaper in the social sphere. Thank you very much, and all the participants of the panel discussion for your insights, and I hope that decision makers are also listening, and trade unions are also listening, and maybe your ideas, your insights will inspire more changes. However, when we talk about lifelong learning, we talk about skills, and what we see in the European documents and also in Lithuanian documents and various other dialogues, the focus is on skills. To a certain extent, this framework of the skills is prompted by Brussels. Let's say in 2006, the concept of basic skills was formulated, let's say like math, some other basic skills, including also digital, social skills. 10 years later, this framework of competencies or skills was supplemented by media literacy, problem solving, safety, responsible behavior, and it would be challenging to reflect upon the situation in Lithuania, both in the educational and employment sectors, how the changes that we see going on affect the young person and an adult. Let's say in 10 years' time, what do you think? What competences, apart from the ones that are included into the framework, what other competencies might be needed? And what competences should we develop in our children? The new competences of the mid-21st century, competences or skills, what could they be? Something we should focus on, something we should start thinking about.
Well, Marius, your contribution. I have 4 children, and each day I have to think about what I want to teach them. Our example, my wives and mine, and of course we have paper books, and we know that we have digital books as well. But reading, the very process of reading, the process of finding out, of discovery, and humanity has put a lot of wisdom into books. This is one thing. Well, the next thing is fluent English. The English language gives you a key key to everywhere in the world. And then computer literacy, that digital literacy, this is very important. And as many functions as possible. Then, in a broader sense, I think it is very important to have one more competence. It is ability to learn. It is what we must teach our children to learn. So whatever the purpose, let's say one wants to learn the Chinese language or, how to engineer rockets. But, when you know English and when you know how to use computers, when you know those algorithms, and these are, of course, all in English. So it is digital. Digital means, and you have those instruments that you can use. And I think that those instruments will become more and more complicated. And then you can use them for every purpose, learning to dance, improving your competences needed at work, etc. Eglė, what about you? What skills do you think are important? I agree. I think that critical thinking is a top priority. Well, sometimes we see people, they are ready for the labor market, but they are in a box. They can apply what they know, but they are not flexible in their decision-making, and they are not capable of using their accumulated knowledge and experience flexibly. So I think it is very important to teach people to think critically. And the COVID pandemic has shown that flexibility is particularly important. It is not only important to adapt and adjust to a certain situation, but you have to adjust to pandemic situations. So you have to be able to learn to be flexible within every situation. Now, what Marius says is communication. In the most general terms, yes. And Saula, you have mentioned it as well. Communication skills are important. What we see now is the English language as a tool of communication. Okay, it is not only English. There are other languages that are needed for communication. We know that very often we communicate with the help of computers. We see people on the screen, so you have to get used to it. You have to adapt to be able to take this reality as it is. And very often a person must change his or her mentality. Okay, I sit in front of a computer, I know things, but everybody around doesn't. So what? So there is no point. I think it is important that many as possible people have those digital skills. Well, thank you, Eglė. Mindaugas, what about you? What new competencies do you think are important for improving our quality of life, particularly in 10 or 20 years? Okay, I don't want to reiterate what has already been said, because those skills and competences are important. But I will speak about a very narrow, I would say very niche thing. It is financial literacy. And I think that we have to start teaching financial literacy very early. Small children must understand that money doesn't, fall into your hands just as it is, but you have to earn it. And our statistical data shows a very sad picture. That, let's say, 260,000 people have debts, not just regular debts that they repay, but debts that are bad debts. So, of course, they get into more and more problems. That's a snowball. So I think it is important to teach our people not to get into that snowball. So we have to start teaching children. I get back to the same financial literacy. Of course, there are more things, investment skills, etc., risk evaluation. But anyway, I think it is very meaningful, and I think that if you fail to recognize those things, you can fail very easily in a modern world. And that's my expectation. Every chain of education must produce or develop a person, teach a person who is capable of continuing and eager to continue learning. There is no final point in learning. That's what is very important, and we must teach people to continue to be eager. Well, I say we're running out of time, but I have just one more question. And that is a question, well, one sentence, short or long. Let's imagine that you can do whatever you want. You are a president, a member of parliament, a government member, and all social partners. And you are that one and only one who has a recipe, has one decision. You have one decision, one step that can lead to a higher speed of changes in our education system. I understand there can be many things, fine, and you have already mentioned quite a few. But forget everything. Forget what to do. Forget your job and your post. Just what do you think now is one most important decision? Oh, I will be banal, but it is a dream. You know, the Singapore model is a possibility to get the second competence, the second qualification, whatever the level. And Singapore has shown that the second diploma is important when you're not very happy with the first, and sometimes you find yourself not very comfortable with that first diploma. Maybe there are changes, but if you get another trade, then you can be happier doing something different. Eglė, what about you? I would say flexible validation of competences. And let's say we have a telephone, a mobile telephone, a smart telephone, and for example, we are not using all of it. So just, flexibility and the broad spectrum of things we can do. Marius, and you? I have a dream. Saule, what you have asked makes me feel a king. I will be a king, and I'm powerful. Beside other things that I would like to say in our system, I want to be an example for other people to, for example, as a king, very, very busy, very, very important and powerful, I still want to find, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes for learning the Finnish language, despite all the difficulties. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. You inspire. Your examples are inspiring. I'm convinced that our viewers are very inspired now. And ladies and gentlemen, I think my conclusion is about that and about lifelong learning, that whether we speak about enterprises, companies, or the public sector, or an individual, investment into skills and competences and identifying what particular skills and competences are needed in our country is very important. If we do this, we will have the adequate and appropriate that system. And I would love to see the engagement of all partners too. So have a nice day today. And never forget to learn all your life. I hope that at least several of you are inspired to apply or maybe to buy a book that will help you acquire new competences. Thank you very much indeed for you, dear speakers, for you, dear panel, and for you, dear viewers. Have a nice day.